Hello, my name is Adam Martin. I'm the executive director for the F5 project. We are a reentry housing program for those who are coming out of jail or prison treatment. You know, sometimes they come from homeless shelters or they come from another halfway house, or sometimes they screwed up what they got going on in their own life and they need a place to go for a little bit to help build their life up. So the whole goal for F5 project has always been that I believe that if people have a second chance, whether it's housing or employment or getting into a community, like a real second chance, like a real form of ugly grace, and I'll talk a little bit more about my definition of what ugly grace is, but like a real opportunity that they'll succeed. A lot of times when people are applying for housing or they're applying for a job or whatever the case may be, even all the way down to applying for services of some kind, they have to check the box that they have a felony background, or they have to explain that they have what their felonies were, or whatever the case may be. So be it. But that usually ends up being a barrier than an opportunity to be honest and transparent and try to build trust. There's a stigma associated with having a felony background. And I know from experience, I'm not only a client, I'm not only the president, but I'm also a client for Hair Club for Men. It's kind of the same mentality, is that we have a bunch of people that work at F5 Project that have either had to deal with mental health issues, or they've had to deal with a felony background, or they've been to prison, or they're just getting out of jail, or not just getting out of jail, our staff's not just getting out of jail, or they've been to jail, or whatever the case may be. And they've been able to navigate through that, and they've become successful. And so we as a team put together a program. It's our housing program, based off the barriers that we've encountered when we were trying to level up our lives. And so this housing program is, I guess in our opinion, is a legitimate housing first program. In the sense of, it's not necessarily permanent housing, but it's a pathway to permanent housing. And so I know there's a lot of definitions out there of what housing first is. Our goal and our definition of housing first is just get them housed, right? Like get them into their own room, get them a bed, get them, access to food, get them to access to, peer support services, and kind of have this holistic approach along with reentry housing. And so when they come and live in any of the properties that I guess we're managing, because we don't own any of the properties, any of the properties that we have, they get their own room, and that's kind of a huge difference compared to most reentry housing programs or halfway house programs or whatever the case may be. Is usually they're doubled or tripled up in these rooms, and we found that when people feel like they have their own sanctuary, just like in permanent housing, they tend to act better, they tend to do better, they feel like a level of ownership with what they have right there because it's for them. So they get their own place, and the first 30 days, there's a curfew, and it's really just to kind of gauge where they're at, what kind of services they're going to need. I've never seen any great decisions happen after 10 p.m. And so that first 30 days is really to help them identify, things that are going to be harmful to them or things that are going to be good for them or whatever. After 30 days, we are pretty big fans of giving people freedom. And so they would be allowed to have multiple nights to go stay somewhere else if they have a girlfriend or if they have a family or whatever. We don't allow visitors at the houses. And so we found that it would be more productive to have that freedom to go spend time with your family or spend the night with your family or whatever it is, instead of having them go in and out of our houses where we have multiple people living in that house. As a group, that's their house, right? And so sometimes having visitors there is a little much for other people that are living in the house. So we have no visitors in the house. And so after 30 days, you get past that curfew, you can start going out and living your life, right? And during that 30 days, you can go out and get a job, and we help navigate making sure that when your probation meetings are, what's your restitution that's owed, what's some amends that you might need to go out and make in the community. We know a lot of second chance employers, so we get them connected to that. But the big shift is they get a dedicated peer support. So somebody who's been in their shoes, who's coming back to help them navigate through what that person had successfully done in their life. And so they get that person dedicated to them, plus a house manager, plus the full staff. They can come here at any time. All the houses are really near our F5 offices. And so, we have rules in there that, we want it to be the most humane place, for opportunity. And so we have no judgments on religion or race or recovery pathway or any of that. We basically help you build those goals on what you want to be. If you want to go to AA or you want to go to NA or you want to go to Smart Recovery, or if you choose church or whatever the case may be. I've always viewed F5 as like the primer to another community, right? We have an F5 community and we're building that up, and it's through advocates and donors and people who've graduated our program and stuff like that. But it's really, that community is just there to help people get or become more successful in the community, but it's to help you identify a community that's already existing for you to go be a part of that at the same time. And so my goal has never been to get someone in F5 and then make sure they stay with us for the rest of their lives and be some kind of like dictator type organization on people's lives. It's been more or less along the lines of helping them identify who they are, what they want to do, where they want to go, and help them achieve that. And so not necessarily like a jail, like catch and release, and not necessarily like a full-on momentum of a community organization that has ties for the rest of your life, but somewhere in between where we help you, get to where you want to go. And so the rules of like no fighting, no aggression, we don't really tolerate repetitive relapses. You could relapse while you're in the house, and I've always been a big fan of what the effort looks like after the relapse or after the mistake or after whatever, rather than the actual data of the mistake itself, right? We look at that, but what did you do after you relapse? And if you're putting forth good effort on trying to, make sure that you're going to work and being a part of your kids' lives and paying off your restitutions, I can deal with a relapse. What I can't deal with is violence. I can't deal with aggression. I can't deal with this alpha dog prison mentality, because all it does is become a virus in the house, and it just kind of tears the whole house down. Making sure the place is clean, your room is clean, the dishes are done around the house. Just like if you had your own place, like if you're going to treat it like it's your own place, you're more likely to like speed through our program to get your own place. The criteria for that, we have partnerships with a few different landlords or corporate owners with apartments and stuff. One particular is Goldmark. We have this program called the Thrive program. So once someone stays with us for 6 months and they follow all the rules, right, and they're not being hostile and they're not showing aggression and they're not trying to be violent, and even if they relapse and or they fail the drug test or they made some mistakes, whatever, right, like once they get through 6 months of like, not violating probation or committing new crimes and stuff like that, we will get connected with Goldmark and go through the application process with them. And this Thrive program is meant for people with like criminal records or don't have the best of rental history or maybe don't have great credit, and help them get into their own apartment. So far, I think this year I don't even know how many we've done, maybe 20 or 30, people have gone through that program. And I only know of one that went through an eviction, right? And so that, I think the big piece for it is that there's like a journey together, right? Not just during that 6 months, but once they get into that apartment, we're still going along that journey with them. They're still allowed to come to the F5 house meetings. They're still allowed to like participate in our events and be a part of our community. And a lot of them, what they're doing is they're finding other communities, whether, like I said, like a church or an AA group or an NA group, or they get more, reconciled with their families. They're out actively doing good things in the community. I have one gentleman who went through this program named James, who is now in the process of buying his first home. And he's stayed sober since he's been with us, which was multiple years ago. And he's had the same job for multiple years. The crazy thing about this is when we got him into his apartment, he had committed his felony 9 months prior. He had only been out of prison for 9 months, and 6 of that 9 months he came and spent at F5, and then he got into a gold mark property, and now is about to buy his first home. He just got approved. They found the house. They updated their Facebook, him and his fiance, and he's just doing awesome things. Another person that came through our program has started a business. Another one is in the process of starting a business. They have kids now and they're engaged, and like this is the stuff that the community doesn't necessarily get to see, and this is why we're so active on social media about our housing program, because it's more than a housing program. It's a like a primer to being a citizen in our community, right? And who better to learn from than people who have, like myself, who my first apartment I found on Craigslist, right? And they were willing to sublease it to me without the apartment people knowing, right? Or someone renting a room to me, or me sleeping on couches, or me living in homeless shelters, or just getting out of detox, or the feeling of what it's like when you're walking out of jail and you realize you literally have nowhere to go, right? Who better to talk to about that? I believe that that's like the language of the heart and pain, right? This is where the ugly grace ingredients is started to mix together, because it's a passionate grace, right? We're willing to do things for people that aren't convenient, that aren't beautiful, right? Grace itself is beautiful, but the actual work that goes into giving grace is hard, and it sucks, and it's a grind, and it's a hustle, right? Answering the phone at 1:30 in the morning because there's a guy that is struggling and he knows there's a half hour left until the liquor store closes, and he's calling you at 1:30 because he doesn't want to drink. Being able to answer that phone call, right? Or get out of bed and leave your wife and your kids and stuff to go pick up a guy who's like hanging outside the liquor store because he wants to drink, or he's by the trap house and he wants to buy some dope, right? Like that's real ugly grace. You don't see a lot of CEOs or executive directors or even church members that are willing to get out of bed and just go help in the community at 2:00 in the morning. I've always believed that grace happens between 8 and 5, but ugly grace happens between 5 and 8, right? 5 p.m. and 8 a.m. The real struggles for people who struggle with mental health issues or substance abuse disorders or gambling problems, or maybe I had a phone call today with a young woman who is struggling being in a halfway house in another state because they're using in it, and there's a lot of prison mentality happening in the house, and she just wants to get out of it. And the fastest we can help her get out of it is like a couple weeks, meaning she has to deal with that stuff for a couple weeks. Imagine going home and having to deal with that drama, right? This is your housing, or your home or your house or whatever is supposed to be your sanctuary to get away from the world, right? And then you come home and you're with a bunch of other people that are either being, could potentially be violent, or they could be, dealing with their mental health, or they're dealing with substance abuse and they're bringing drugs into your home, this is the real ugly form of grace. This is why a lot of people don't get into housing. It's easy to work with people when they're at their job. It's easy to work with them when they're at your office. It's easy to work with them when they're at church with you. But when you're like going into their home and dealing with them at the ground level of them trying to uproot their life and like level up, it gets really ugly, right? I've seen people in reentry housing die. I've seen them overdose. I've seen family members die and overdose, right? I've seen people at their worst, right? Like passed out, drunk, naked, in their home as I'm knocking on the door trying to like help them, and they're barely able to answer the door because it's locked and they don't know how to unlock it. That's ugly grace. It's not something you can post on social media. It's not like something you can go out and talk about how awesome you are, because nobody looks awesome when they're carrying a drunk out of their house, right? And the real ugly form of that is continuing to help that person, even though it feels like they're violating you and they're taking advantage of you, right? And then it gets even more ugly when people judge you for helping that person, right? That is the momentum I'm trying to build with F5 project. Being the hands and feet of real ugly grace, whether it's through our housing program, our peer support program, or the contracts that we have with like the hospitals or the state or whatever, going above and beyond to help people where most red tape and barriers exist because it's a conflict of interest, or it's enabling them, or it's whatever. And so, you know, my big goal for F5 project is that we try to eradicate as much red tape as possible and try to alleviate those barriers. And one place to do that is through our housing program. If they complete it in that 6 months, they get a certificate. And a lot of that certificate is recognized by a lot of landlords. And we've seen a lot of doors open for people that have that certificate. And so that's the housing program, kind of wrapped up in a holistic way when it comes to mental health and peer support and substance abuse and criminal records and employment and housing, like kind of all wrapped into one. And I think that that's why we're a game changer when it comes to housing first. We might not be the actual permanent housing first model, but we are the primer to get them into that. So I thank you for your time. Thank you to the North Dakota Housing and Finance Agency for asking me to be a part of this conference. And I was told to leave some time in the end for questions. So thank you for your time.